U.S. military has grounded an entire fleet of Osprey aircrafts, and this came after 8 service members, including Pittsfield native Air Force Staff Sergeant Jacob Gallagher, was killed in a crash off the coast of Japan just 1 week ago.
Now, Western Mass News reporter Olivia Hickey now joins us live in studio tonight with the details. Olivia.
Chris, Abby, according to the U.S. Air Force, the stand down of these aircrafts was ordered to reduce risk while the investigation into the crash continues. To learn more about the unique aircraft, we spoke with retired U.S. Army officer Gary Lafort.
The V-22 is an aircraft that when the engines are in a horizontal position, it acts as a helicopter. When it's in the vertical position, it acts like an aircraft, can travel at high speeds.
Lafort explains the Osprey V-22's versatility allows the military to react quickly, making it very useful in special operations, search and rescue missions, and other scenarios. However, he tells Western Mass News the aircraft has had a history of problems and the fleet has been grounded before.
From what I understand, it relates to the clutch. They're generally considered clutch-related type problems. I'm not sure if the problem relates to being able to convert without problems from a horizontal helicopter configuration to a vertical airplane configuration where the problem lies, or possibly changing gears and being able to go to higher speeds.
According to the Air Force, the preliminary investigation indicates a potential material failure caused last week's accident, but the cause of the failure is unknown. Congressman Richard Neal released a statement today commending the decision to ground the fleet, reading in part, "Until the investigation is completed, our focus must remain on the family and friends grieving the tragic loss of Staff Sergeant Gallagher and 7 of his fellow airmen. We join the Pittsfield community and a grateful nation in honoring their lives and service as we send our thoughts and prayers to their families during this difficult time. We have a duty to ensure the safety of the brave men and women in uniform who have devoted their lives to defending our nation and promoting our values abroad."